Good.
All right, everyone. Welcome again to this week's edition of the Bigfoot Notes from the Field. We have actually all three of our regional directors on this evening. So David's in the background listening in. So and Gerald, sorry we didn't get you on, man. We'll try to get people on as we can. We only have room for four spots in here, but so let me start out like we usually do with a little bit of news going on. And of course, this is where I get to plug my own stuff. So I published my 10th book yesterday.
All right.
It's available on Kindle now. This was a project that I sort of played with for the past few years, and it's just been kind of sitting there in a file for a while. So a couple of weeks ago, I decided to drag it out and continue on with it and finish it up and get it out of my hair. So, which there isn't a lot of. So, one less thing to hang up there. But anyway, there we go. See, and the Bigfoot 101, or Bigfoot Fieldwork 101 books, I'll be getting back on those and getting the other four wrapped up. Okay, we'll try Gerald again. I'll be trying to get those wrapped up here as soon as possible so that all 10 of those are published. So we were going to talk about reports and reporting tonight. And Tom and I spent almost 4 hours on Skype yesterday talking about this, among other things. But one of the things we talked about was, and Tom, I'm going to go ahead and let you pick it up from here, because you had a lot of great questions. And, doing a report or collecting a Bigfoot report is a lot more than just, going and talking to a witness and recording what they had to say, because there's a great deal more you can do with that. And in fact, Jeremiah, whenever we can get him back on, he had an individual. No, was it you? I can't remember. It was one of you two that had an individual, and there turned out to be maybe it was Jeremiah, a lot more information about it. I told him to keep digging, and pretty soon the whole thing really mushroomed, and there was just a ton more information that came out, surrounding that. So, Tom, go ahead and let's let you go ahead and pick it up here about interviewing.
All right. Yeah. And so I had something similar to you guys. And what I had was, my team member, Jeremy Benson. He's in the northern part of Idaho. He interviewed a witness, and it was one of those reports that was a peripheral report. So by peripheral, we're saying it wasn't a direct sighting, but there were a number of coincidences or incidents that happened as part of this report. And I think it's a fascinating example of how something that seems maybe innocuous at the time, especially to the person, when you go back and really investigate it and look at what's happening around that area or what has happened around that area, you may begin to see a pattern emerge. And this is the case. This particular incident, again, Jeremy Benson took this statement and interviewed this person who had a series of encounters in 1988. And it was while this person was living in Washington State. So one of the regions that's closer to Thorfinn's realm, his area in northern Washington, it was in Snohomish County. And what had happened was that it was a young mother. She was a 23-year-old woman, 1988, and they were camping around the northern part, outside of Granite Falls, about 21 miles west of Granite Falls, at a place called the Big Four Ice Caves. So that's a fairly popular spot. And what they decided to do as a family was to camp not near the campground by the Big Four Ice Caves, but they made their own way. So they took Mountain Loop Highway, which is north of the Big Four Ice Caves, and they parked along the side of the road, and they hiked in. They hiked in about 4.5 miles or so, and found a suitable campsite. And in the process, they met another family. So this was a woman, a husband, and 3 children. It was a man. The young boy was 8, and then he had an older sister and a younger sister. And what happened was after they set up camp in this very remote place, they did meet another couple coming in. They did some camping with them. It was quite a remote place. There weren't any other campers around. And there was a river that was close by. It was the Stilgwamish River, the South Fork of the Stilgwamish River. And they were camped alongside that river. Well, they went out during the day for a day hike along the river and noticed almost instantly a putrid smell. And it was an odd, strange scent. And they thought for a moment they'd camped near some rotting carcass. So they were concerned that, maybe they were in a bear kill area or there was something there, but the smell went away. And then it reemerged again as they hiked along the river. But what they found, which was really curious, was a tree about 8 feet tall, a young tree that had several whole salmon stuck in the top of the tree. And the salmon was fairly fresh, so it hadn't yet rotted. Mm-hmm. And it was so it wasn't desiccated and stinking and decomposing. It was still fairly fresh. And they thought that was the oddest thing. They couldn't explain that. They didn't understand how a bear could have done that or even a cat. It just looked odd. Now, at the time, none of them thought Bigfoot. That wasn't on their mind. And they had some, it turns out when this fellow interviewed this woman, she had heard of Bigfoot, but hadn't really thought about it as much being in that area and didn't know anything about the standard Bigfoot behaviors that you hear about now on television. So it wasn't so widely publicized.
Right.
And they were outdoors people. So they were campers, hunters, fishermen. They were familiar with the wildlife and that particular area. And what they thought it was could have been a bear. Well, anyway, later on that day, they just passed it on and thought it was a strange kind of bizarre incident, but let it go. And they went and camped. And that evening, the husbands went into town to go get some supplies, and the wives built up the campfire. And then the stink started to come through again. And they thought, oh, no, what's this? And it came and it passed again. And then all of a sudden, they heard knocking noises. And so they heard a noise that they described as a tree on tree, someone hitting a tree. And this happened back and forth several times over the course of, it was about 45 minutes that this went on, this knocking back and forth. And then it ended with a crescendo of footfalls, big steps and crashing through the forest around the area. And this woman was frightened, but she didn't understand what the knocking was all about. Mm-hmm. It was again, just kind of wrote it off as odd and figured that perhaps the footfalls could have been a bear, could have been some other big animal. But she said they were loud and crashing, and it sounded, when she thought back about it after these many years, it sounded like big single bipedal footsteps.
Right.
Now, yeah. So anyway, what was so curious about this is she hadn't thought anything of this until Jeremy was asking people he knew if they'd had Bigfoot encounters. And, he talked to her about that. So she shared with him that as the years went on and she learned more about Bigfoot, through television and whatever else was happening, the many programs, that she thought it was so peculiar that these things might have been related to a Bigfoot in the area. It's just that, again, at the time, her only frame of reference was bear. So that was happening was there's a big bear out there. Mm-hmm. Well, when Jeremy starts doing a little further investigation, if you take a look and you go ahead, you can Google Snohomish County in Washington, and you'll find out that's one of the top spots if you want to see a Bigfoot. Oh yeah, there's a lot of sightings right in that area, and you start going through some of the sightings that you can find that are just online. I mean, this isn't is a very simple search. And what you find is you'll find incidents where they had the same putrid smell just south of Mountain Loop Highway where they were located.
Right.
So in the very same place, the very kinds of stinky smells and the footfalls. We didn't find anything yet about the salmon.
You start finding correlation,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's essentially what he's doing. Jeremy's doing now is he's expanding that search, and he'll be contacting Thorfinn in Washington and passing that information along to see if that could be helpful in expanding any of his current research.
Absolutely, yeah, that's the way to do it.
The frig, man.
Hey, Tom, can I, not to shift gears on you necessarily, but I know you spent a lot of time interviewing Will earlier today.
Yes.
I'm sorry, yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah.
And then sending us the files. I went through some of that and kind of picked out a few things and some things that I had thought about before when we had started to talk about our formatting for reporting.
Yes.
Want to get into some of that potentially?
Absolutely.
Results, or we can kind of maybe frame out some of that and for the benefit, since we've got it sounds like Jeremiah's having difficulty getting on, but since we pretty much got all of us in one place here for the first time.
Yeah, it's a good time to talk about it. And that's kind of what I had in mind was, we can sort of, we can talk about individual reports, things that go on, but, sort of what goes into a report and not, like I said, not just the details, but there are a lot of things that surround a report, surround a sighting, a lot of peripheral things. And then you have to match up, you start getting pieces from the surrounding area, when we talk about like, other witnesses in the area and things like that. So I'll let you guys go ahead and start that. Let me try to bring on, I guess I can bring on Gerald. Since
you mind if I just kind of go on down my little list of kind of what I was gathering from that and,
sure.
and get you guys input on it. In the military, I'm, of course, old time Army guy, we used what was called, and Tom and I've talked quite a bit about this on our own in the last couple of days, but used spot report, a salute report, just a generalized, which is, size, activity, time, location, unit, and all that kind of stuff that doesn't apply to this, but just trying to keep a general framework. So what I was hearing from the interview are some key tenets that you do, and this is some of the things you do in human intelligence when you go out and you deal with somebody. First of all, you have to understand your subject. You have to understand the potential psychological frame of mind they might be in. A lot of people are apprehensive. Thinking about, I know I had a particular encounter and embarrassing sometimes to talk about dealing with people. But, number one is probably being respectful. Letting them know that you're not there to judge, trying to, build that rapport, that connection with them. And all I would say is you want to open it up and be respectful. You let them know you're not there to judge them. Potentially let them know, if you've had one, to say, hey, I'm not just interested, I'm with you. I've been there, I know how you're feeling, and you connect with them. Because to be honest with you, before I talk to you, Will, there's only one other person I talked to who actually heard what I heard,
mm-hmm.
And that felt like it was such a weight off of me to know that there was somebody else out there, because everybody else does the kind of, big sigh. Or
and that's very common. Right.
And they lean more toward, they trust your character, but they still just kind of go, well, I'm a skeptic, I don't know.
Exactly. You can't really, unless you've had some kind of experience like that, it's really difficult to, sort of meet that other person eye to eye. You can't really make a connection with them. And I know I've gotten instant rapport with many, many witnesses because when I'll start talking within 30 seconds, they know that I saw what they saw. And vice versa,
right.
Not all of us, have that experience. Tom doesn't yet. Of course, we're gonna break his cherry on that one at some point. But We'll get you an underwear changing moment there, Tom.
You got to let people know before you go out, and then we'll just check. Because if you just go off the net for a long time, we'll just have to put you in that missing 411.
That's right. We'll know what happened.
But so be respectful. Let them know that you're not there to judge them. We do this with soldiers when we're interviewing them to let them know, because people are, especially soldiers, but people in general, want to be viewed and remembered in a positive way.
Absolutely.
And so there's always a fear of being viewed negatively. So when you know, not only, am I not here to judge you, but you're also potentially helping add to the body of knowledge on the subject. So then they're participating, not just recalling something, and you're kind of just, taking a police report. So sometimes you can get people more interactive with you if you say, look, you don't have to be a scientist. We're just trying to get the details of what it is. One thing Tom said the other day that I really took interest to is that he recommend that you take somebody back in time earlier that day and they start recalling things, because, human cognition, they tend to, we associate memories with multiple sensory inputs.
Right.
If there's somebody that's a stroke victim and they can't, they regain some ability, but they have difficulty finding words and sentences because they've lost the connection to whatever it was. Maybe they remembered something and they associate it with orange,
right?
Or a piece of silverware or something, and they can't think of the name of that object. You have to literally pick up an object,
right,
and have them say what the real name is over and over and over again with an unlike object in their hand, so that they register it in a different neural pathway.
Exactly.
So I think that's excellent, having them go back to a point in time earlier that day that's totally unrelated to that traumatic event.
And that's what I talked about with Tom yesterday. I said, first of all, when I interview somebody, I have them tell me about what they were doing before the incident took place. And then later on, now you can either do it the same day or later, because you if you get, hey, there's Gerald, with a witness. Now, if you get a really good, interesting situation that happened, down the road, you can go and talk to the person and talk to them about something completely unrelated. You're talking cars, the dog, whatever. And oftentimes through the course of a totally unrelated conversation, things will hit their memory. And they'll say, wow, I remembered this piece, like you said, Jay, because something will jog their memory in something that's totally unrelated, but it makes a connection in those neural pathways. So, and especially if it was something that was 2 or more sensory inputs, it really bonds it much stronger in their minds.
When people have traumatic events, procedure, things like that,
we have no choice. You could resolve this issue very quickly by simply releasing a New York Times text. It's right. You dispel them. You're misleading the American people. That's the case. If you didn't tell them that, you'll prove you're innocent. But in fact,
anyway, so
Gerald, do you have a TV on?
Yeah, hold on. I'll go to the other room.
Okay, I can hear that. I can't hear Jay. I can hear your TV.
I was listening to the debate.
So then you that's not important. This is a much more important subject.
That's right.
I apologize.
We have an ability to influence this process, not necessarily that one. But so you be respectful, make a connection, let them know they're part of the solution process. That way they join in the positive framework and they can view themselves as positive. Smile. I'm not a big smiler, but smile. What's important to keep yourself positive.
That's right.
I'm in North Alabama. There's places here I go, and cultural names for everything, and you go rolling up in somebody's yard, and they've got 6 dogs and 9 kids, and and people wait to their front porch. They're looking at you like, who are you? And are you the IRS? I mean,
right.
you start, if you're cold calling and you start a conversation with somebody, but it's interesting how they will open up to you if you can find a common ground. I talked to a couple of weeks ago, and I noted that the woman was, because I went to follow up on something. A guy told me about somebody he grew up with that was from a local town. He said, the guy did tend to drink a lot, so I went to know him. But I asked him if there were other places or people in the area, and he said, well, just drive down this other road. All those people are friendly down through there, and it's kind of near they called it the creek thing or the slough thing.
Sure.
Thing, THANJ. I saw some folks out here. Seriously, that's what they call it, THANJ. So I saw these folks stand up in front of their house, and I passed it by, and I thought, no, you know what? I'm going to go talk to them. They got a bunch of little kids. That kind of noise tends to potentially attract these, things in. And let me go see. So I went up there and wearing an Army jacket, and I happened to have an airborne shirt. Hey, here's my name. This is what I'm doing. Interested. So they got the Army thing, and then we kind of talked about that at first. And they started talking about, we've been hearing these female type screams coming from behind our house. And their oldest son wasn't there at the time, and he had pictures of an odd footprint and some claw marks they found up in a tree and some other things. So I haven't got that evidence yet. But anyway, so you open up to them and get that going. Then when we go into collecting reports, I would want to take some baseline demographics. You want to get the daytime group, number of witnesses, perhaps gender. I call it the environmental, weather, illumination, basic layout of the terrain,
right,
and then geographic location. And I've sent Tom and Will, you both, and Daniel, one guy, just gone back and forth with kind of giving it a shot, just kind of pull out the back location, you can find it, and then just some general kind of bullets of the general scenario of what happened, and saving it as a JPEG, and it may just be an addition that we put into the database or something. So, when you read about it, like I was trying to jot out when Tom was talking about that report, because, I'm interested, even though that's not my region, I'm interested in pulling up those areas and road intersections. Like you and I were talking, Will, about that research that you do. And I heard that 911 call from the homeless woman. She said, we were near this highway and near this road intersection. I'm like, I can look that up.
Sure.
So I looked it up. Google Earth, it dropped the Google Map, street view. Could see the water towers, could see the wood line, and in this, so you could kind of look at the lay of the land.
Right.
And then when you zoom out, you're like, man, that's an urban area. There's a lot of houses that's kind of close to being in town, and I'm thinking, that a lot of people would dismiss that and say that's not possible here or there, but then you're only talking, a few miles from
right
that other place we're talking. But anyway, so gathering some of baseline demographic, daytime groups, some environmental, location. Take a page out of Will's book. What's your previous knowledge on the subject to establish kind of a baseline of what their knowledge was and what interest is and all that.
Right, and to see if they're putting any artificial information from their mind, their frame of reference, into the story they're telling. Before all this stuff got really public, there wasn't all that. So the information, and I think we talked about like pre-Bluff Creek, prior to that, there wasn't a lot of information out there. So when a person related a story, it was pretty much what they experienced, what they saw. After that time, and since then, the more stuff gets out in the public venue, even and Tom and I talked about this, when somebody, let's say they're totally disinterested in the subject, right? They walk by a television finding Bigfoot's on, and maybe they see something for 10 or 15 seconds. It still gets in here. It's embedded, even if they don't consciously realize that information went in, because they heard it, they saw it, it was recorded. So when a situation happens, they're in that situation. When they go to relay that situation, whatever pieces they picked up get plugged into what it is they're telling. And that's an artificial piece of information that's part of that, whatever happened. It's how they're able to, relay that situation by using those things that they have in their frame of reference.
I think it's interesting. Whenever you go to Finding Bigfoot stuff, it's always, whoa. It's more some kind of recorded thing.
It's all total crap.
Nothing like what I heard.
Yeah.
But I've listened to, many of the Sasquatch Chronicles episodes that you were on before, and I can't tell you how many of those sighting reports, the second part of what I heard was that deep, guttural, growling, breathy,
yeah,
to this high-pitched, eerie, banshee, witch-like scream. That was the second part of what I heard.
Exactly.
It was very primate. It was very ape-like. It was that woofing.
And that's the way. That's the way the vocals have been described for decades. Is they start out with that low, rumbling kind of growl, and then work up to that high-pitched scream. And it's what I've heard many times in the field. I mean, I've heard a lot of different vocals, but that's the most common one. Yeah.
But that to me, that when I hear that, it's like, okay, somebody's not, and I've heard recordings played, that to me, I'm going, that's a person.
Absolutely.
What I heard is definitely outside of the realm of human capability. There's no way that a human being can span that vocal range. But well, I'm going off here. We just stay with the subject. I'm starting to start time.
Robert.
Hey, Jay, may I ask one question, guys? I just wanted to interject and sort of elaborate on what Jay was saying to bridge the two things. I put over in the notes in the chat one of the a reference to the almanac. And the reason for that is, and I just want to highlight something that Jay said, which was gathering the demographics and just the basic information. Mm-hmm. Well, when Jeremy went to talk to this witness, this particular incident happened in 1988. Mm-hmm. And so some of the details were missing. Mm-hmm. But what detail was, the two details that were relevant were that she knew the month that this happened and didn't know if it was the beginning or the end of the month and didn't know what day of the week it was. But she did know what the weather was like, the temperature, and she also knew what the state of the moon was. So she said the moon was almost full, or it was very bright, and it was a certain temperature. Now, if you go back, I have in the almanac, you can do a historical weather search.
Exactly. And there's another important component to that: verification. And I've made the mistake myself in recent times by not going back and utilizing that particular information that's out there, weather, moon and sun conditions, things like that, to verify a story. And found out later that, the witness described those things was not what those conditions were. So, it also can help you pinpoint information, and it helps you verify what that person said. So two very important components there.
And you never know, as you say, what's going to be relevant. Like you told, I think Will was telling me some of his eyewitness accounts, and there was a detail about this particular family just being new to farming. Oh, and then also the radishes. Yeah. Could you tell that really quickly, the radish story?
Well, now this was the Goldhammer incident back in 1989, and I it's what the book Haunted Valley was about. When I went there, now those folks were brand new from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, were city people, had never lived in the country. They bought 13 acres south of the town of Yacolt, and that's a little place out in the middle of nowhere. Gerald knows, it's built up a little now, but it's still kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And that part of the Yacolt Valley, most of the people who lived there were older folks in those days, so they didn't utilize their acreage. So nobody went out in the valley in that part of the area. So these folks bought 13 acres, and they decided they were going to try their hand at all kinds of things. So they bought a horse, and they planted a garden. And if you grow radishes, they grow like weeds. They multiply like crazy. So they didn't like the radishes when they grew them, so they pull a handful out for the horse every night. Well, the horse didn't like them either, so around the time their first sighting of this creature happened, every morning they'd find the pile of radishes gone, and they assumed some other animal must have taken them and eaten them. So, and it was a pretty good handful, that they would take. And I told them, I said, well, don't change the conditions because, that's what I was taught in my anthropology courses. If you want to observe a primate in the wild without altering whatever it is their behaviors are, you don't want to do anything. You don't want to introduce anything into the environment or disturb the environment at all. You want to just simply observe. So I said, keep doing what you're doing, and more things will probably happen. So, and I don't know how far did you want me to tell about the horse and all that, or I mean, we could go on about that whole thing.
The only thing I wanted to make a note of there was that accomplished a couple of different things. One is that conversation you had was rapport building. So you found
absolutely.
out some facts about this family, and you were talking about their move from the city to the country and to their venture in farming. And then you learn this strange detail of the radishes. And then later came into play.
Well, here's something you can do, and I'll as my advice to you guys, when you're interviewing people now, that situation, I found out about it on the front page of the Columbia newspaper in Vancouver. One morning, early June of 1989, I went out, got the newspaper. I sat down on the front porch. It was a beautiful, June morning, so I thought I'd sit there and look at the paper, right? I look at the headlines, and it unfolded. I flipped it over, and here's this big article right on the front page about this Bigfoot sighting. It happened like 3 days previous. So I knew instantly everybody who saw the paper is interested in the subject. All the wannabes are going to race out there, and they're going to ruin the situation. So I thought to myself, well, I'm going to go out there and talk to the people anyway. And sure enough, I walked up when I got there because they gave the address and everything for these people. And, of course, everybody, somebody who was a Bigfoot hunter claimed they were a biologist from Seattle had come there, and all these other people had showed up, and all they wanted was to record the people's story, look for footprints, Bigfoot poop or hair, and then off they went. And I thought, well, okay. So I introduced myself, explained to the people that, what I had seen when I was a teenager. And just the year before, I'd had a second sighting not far from there on the Washougal River, which is only a few miles from there. And that sort of instantly built that rapport. So they said, sure, we'll tell you what we saw. So they explained to me, and I brought a whole bunch of show and tell stuff. So we were looking at pictures and had a good discussion. And I asked them, I said, well, tell me what these other investigators did and asked. So they told me. And what was peculiar about that sighting, now I'll go into it just a little bit. Since this family was brand new to the area, and we talked a little bit about the radishes and the farming, the horse was tied up in the corral with a rope. And the lady of the house, Brenda, was going to go out and ride the horse, and her stepson, Nick, were sitting there watching TV. And then the horse started raising holy hell in the corral. And this was about 1:00 in the afternoon. So she said, Nick, would you go out and see what's wrong with the horse? I don't want the rope getting in the horse's hooves and getting injured. So he went out there, and Nick told me what he thought he saw. Now, the corral had a tree line on the left side, and it was all open on the right side, open pasture. And he thought he saw a person walking away from the corral down along the tree line to the lower pastures. So he went running after this person to find out what the hell they were doing on their property. As he gets fairly close to this person, he slips and falls on a tree limb that was in the tall grass and made a bunch of noise. Well, he's only about 40 or 50 feet away from this thing at this point. And it turns around, hearing the noise, to see what's behind it. And he said, then he sees what it is. And he said he was trying to get up, and he sees this huge creature there. And he said its eyes got real big, and it sort of reared its head back like this. Then it leaned forward like it was trying to get a better look at him. He said, then it put its arms out at 45 degrees from its body, palms facing him, and started moving towards him. Well, he gets up and he runs like hell to the house, obviously. Well, in the meantime, when he took off, the creature turned around and went back the direction it was going, the same direction. Nick slips on a better pair of boots, runs back out, and kind of the same thing happened. The thing hears him, and it turns around. This time, it didn't just try to hurt him. It come barreling after him. So he took off running. He climbs up on a little outbuilding they had there. Now, mind you, neither time the creature tried to actually catch him. And nobody seemed to catch on to what was going on. It was trying to keep him away from something. So I said, and now it waited. It waited for him up there to make sure he wasn't coming back. Then he said after a while it turned around and went right on the same direction it was going the first time. And I said, did any of these other so-called investigators go down the direction the creature went? No, nobody was interested. I said, do you mind if I go? They said, sure, we'll take you down. So off we went down the same way the creature went. And in the lower fields, there was a big cottonwood tree that had blown over, as they do often. And this was a big one. It was probably 3-4 feet thick and with a big root wad standing up. And it was in a place where there had been kind of a seasonal pond. So there was a little dried mud there. And in that dried mud, there were all kinds of tracks of 2 young Sasquatches. Apparently, they'd been concealed in this position, and the adult male was trying to keep Nick, a threat, away from the young ones that were concealed. And so by asking questions and listening to what they're saying and thinking about behaviors and why things happen and all the context, and were other witnesses around, you have to look at a much broader picture to really see, because what happens with a report, there's simply a snapshot of a much bigger picture that's going on. And the more that you can expand that investigation around one sighting, and as Jeremiah found out, sometimes it opens up a huge can of worms. You find a ton of information, and you can really start building the context of a situation, an area, what's going on.
Hey, well, let me jump in there for just a second, because you said a couple of things that are key. I think that are key in this, and that's what I think Tom is going for, is trying to data mine those little nuggets that you carry around in your you're old or anything,
Yeah.
Okay. And this is
Jay, your mic. I think your microphone's having trouble. I can hardly hear you.
Can you hear me?
Put it a little closer to you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There you go.
Hear me now?
Much better.
All right, this is I'm my tablet wasn't working on this, so I'm on my smartphone trying to do this. So
I hear you. Well, you got Gerald with that one.
His picture's locked up in its fuzzy, so that's a ghost Gerald, is what I can tell. Okay, so you're interacting with these people. First of all, they don't know you. You're trying to build a rapport. And the first thing is, if they've never had an encounter before, which, most people, it's a one-time deal,
Right.
So they're probably in the same boat as everybody else, is what the heck is going on?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I find out more about what the subject is? So I think, he is giving them, like you said, with your experience, your tips, things like that, to say, don't change them. If you still want interaction, don't change the environment, whatever. Find out what their intent is. Are they scared? Do they not want them there? Are they trying to find out more information about it? That sort of thing. And
right.
Potentially, help them with that. I think the real note here is when you said, show them some other evidence. You carried things with you, not just to build the relationship, but I can't tell you how valuable that would have been if somebody, if let's say I reported it, somebody came to interview me. The next thing I'm going to say is, show me what you got.
I had a show. I brought a 4-inch binder that was full of stuff, and what we did was we sit and talked, and I was able to answer their questions and show them examples of what I was talking about. it was kind of a show and tell thing, and we really built that rapport. And I'll tell you, after there was a lot that happened that day, and afterwards, they didn't want anyone else to have access to their property.
People are going to show up. They're going to video clip of them. It's let me take from you and let me leave. And then that leaves these people with a sense of helplessness because they aren't any farther along than they were to begin with.
And they didn't know what was going to happen next. That's what they were concerned about, and they were actually very worried about that. They said, "Jesus, this we have no clue that anything like this existed. What do we do next? What if it comes back?" And I was able to offer them some advice and a link to myself. I said, and I told them, I said, now you've seen an adult. We found tracks of 2 young ones. I said, there's at least a female in the area, maybe more. If you this is what you can possibly expect. If that happens, I'm not too far away. Give me a call. And sure enough, within the month, they did see female in the yard, standing there watching the house under one of the big out lights. So I was able to make predictions, and then those predictions happened. And there was a whole series of things that happened. I mean, it was an incredible 9 months, that investigation. Even our own people. I was telling Tom, at the time we had, I had created one of the early organized efforts in this subject. It was called the Pacific Coast Sasquatch Investigation Team. And it was, to this date, as far as I know, the only nonprofit corporation devoted to proving these things were real. And we did that basically to show people we were out to make bucks. So, and it was a trust and confidence builder for us. So one of my, we had a board of directors, and 2 of the people on the board went out. We usually go out and meet and stay outside the people's property because we didn't want to intrude on their privacy in the evening. So we'd go out and listen to kind of monitor what was going on. And Don Turner, a good friend of mine who's gone now, but Don had never seen one, wasn't really interested in the subject. His girlfriend, Carol, was our PR person. He used to come along just for her, but Don and I got to be pretty good friends. And Don was very, really sharp guy, very, I'd say, skeptical, the kind of skeptic I like, who's sort of on the fence, but, sort of a show me and I'll believe. Well, one evening before I got there, right before it got dark, Don and Carol were in the car waiting, and Carol was in the back getting some snacks out. And he said within 30 feet of his car, one of these things walked right in front of their car. And so when I got there, he says, "God damn it, Will," he says, "I knew eventually you were going to make a believer out of me." But, I mean, and there were a lot of things that happened like that, and again, we go around and talk to people and disturbing these things. Now we talk, and there's a whole lot of things we can talk about with just that one thing, like with the whole radish thing. We had this PhD come out there, Mr. Genius, and I won't go into everything that idiot did, but he introduced a bunch of food and things into the situation that we kept intact the whole time, and we were getting a lot of great results. These things were coming very close to us. I mean, we would hear them, and lots of people were having sightings there, including our own people, tracks, the whole 9 yards. This idiot brought a bunch of food and stuff out, made sexual advances to the gentleman's wife there, and, did a whole bunch of crap he should have been. He should have had my foot up his backside, but he didn't stick around long enough for me to get there. And anyway, these things, it pissed them off. They went to the neighboring farm, completely tore their garden up, and scared the people so bad they abandoned their farm. So when you look at the results of what can happen, and again, it's all part of this big thing. There's a certain way to approach things and people, and that was the way. I mean, this guy definitely didn't know how to approach people. He had those 3 letters after his name, so he thought he knew more than we did. So he found out differently.
I like to kind of respond to Jay. He has a lot of good questions, and he has a lot of about asking people questions and stuff and how to approach them and stuff. One thing you also have to realize that if you've heard about that these people have seen a Sasquatch, then other people have too. So these people have heard a lot of ridicule, as we have. I know I have. And so when you approach these people, understand they may have a wall that you're going to have to start chipping down. Right. And trust me, I've interviewed people before in the police department. You've got to approach them as you really care, and you care about them. And I think your sincerity will come through. It may
That's very important.
You know, it's very, it is very important. And it may take a little while, but you just start a rapport, get that rapport going. You'll read it. You'll read it as soon as you're walking up to them, whether or not they're going to talk to you or how friendly they are. They may be a little standoffish. Mm-hmm. So that'll direct what type of an approach you want to take toward these people. Right. But you've got to approach these people sincerely. You understand what they're going through. You've gone through what they have gone through, and you just basically want to get their story. And you know, you could go to a traffic accident and get 9 different testimonies from different people that's seen the same thing. You know, time makes a big difference. The longer it takes to get out of the story, you know, things may add or delete from it. You know, so you've got to read between the lines. You know, and take the story as it comes, and relate it as they tell it to you. But you got to, you know, intelligently look between the lines to see what possibly has happened. I think what you did, Bill, by taking it a step farther and hey, take me to it.
Now here's something that you made me think about. Now this is important too if you're able to do this. Now, obviously, you know, if a story happened 20 years ago, it may be very difficult to do this, but not impossible. If the person is close to where the area is where this happened, take them out there and have them go step by step and do it in small steps as the situation unfolded, because a lot of times it'll jog their memory. Like Jay said, there are certain things. It could be, and it could even be things like the amount of sunlight, the smells, things like that, temperature, that'll jog their memories. You know, if it can be arranged on the very similar kind of a day that the situation happened, for instance, that might really enhance a person's memory. There's a lot of little gimmicks you can do, but the basic thing is trying to get to the real nuts and bolts of what happened, and not just with that particular person, but you have to look at the bigger picture. What's the history of things that have happened in that area? Were there patterns before? Are people currently still seeing things? Are they seeing the same things?
Let's touch on that just for a second, because that was kind of the next bullet here. Was, you know, we go into the previous knowledge and we gather their encounter or their experience, but evidence collection. You know, one thing that you know we forensic collection in the military, if you're doing site exploitation or things like that, is, and you know, I'm sure the police force, I'm not associated with the police department at all, but you don't want to contaminate the evidence, and you don't want to contaminate the scene, which is difficult
Absolutely.
to do. So if you take somebody out, I can imagine you walk them back through a scenario to try and pinpoint where the majority of the activity is, but when you're actually going to collect the scene, you know, there's 2 approaches, maybe more, but there's 2 that I'm aware of. One is gridding an area. You have to establish your grid, you potentially contaminate the area.
Right, so, exactly.
Into an area that you haven't been to before and you're worried about getting too close to it, then you establish a circumference that's a comfortable, and you take pictures of that whole area 360, and not just, people tend to focus on the evidence itself. They tend to,
you got to have the context.
You need to get the footprint. You know, you need to go to the micro and the macro, and then turn around, take pictures of landmarks in that vicinity as well. So you can go back if you had to go do a follow up, find the same location, and then you walk the perimeter, you know, say 100 meters, and very carefully, you know, look for, you know, anything that maybe disturb the then slowly work your way toward wherever that tangible piece of evidence might be, and you mark them, whether it's marker flag.
It's one of the things I'm actually going to cover in one of the next I don't know, volumes 8 or 9 of the Bigfoot Fieldwork 101 is about how to actually collect evidence. Well, the one I'm working on right now is searching areas. One of the next ones is going to be actual evidence collecting. And you're right. It's one of those things you really have to. And what I used to use as an example was when I was in college, I went to the archaeological field school and actually got hired on a couple of digs after that. It was really fun. But and it's exactly that. You have to gather the context of the area. Something, of course, and you add the history and stuff later, but gridding the area and being extremely scientific about it, because what you want to be able to do is have the information collected in such a way that anyone in the future could recreate what you documented in a lab to exact measurements. And that way, then the information is valuable scientifically down the road after you're, say, long gone. And like I was telling Tom yesterday, I said, what I want for us to do, and I guess I should touch real quickly. Robert asked a question what our mission statement was, or our goal, and it's quite simply 2 words. It's issue resolution. That's it. We're out to resolve the issue. That's what this group is about. So the procedures we'll try to adapt those now, whether it's police, military, archaeological, we can blend all of those together. I think a lot of them are very close in their procedures. And that's something that we as a group need to actually decide on how exactly we want to do that. But we want to, whatever we do in the next 10 years with this subject, if we prove these things were real, whatever we do 50 years from now could be used by scientists to recreate.
Do you have a recommended toolkit, so to speak? I mean, is that I ordered some of your books. I haven't got them yet, but because I've never used a footprint. So
absolutely. Actually, I will send you.
I imagine you'd want to take Ziploc bags, and things like that.
I'll tell you what. I will send you. In fact, for our regionals, I'll send you guys the PDFs for each of the books, and then some additional some additional information also. That's not included in those, because Eric Garcia is one of our guys in the Southern California team, and Eric's actually getting his PhD currently in forensic work. So he recommended some evidence collecting kits that are already put together, and they're relatively inexpensive. So in conjunction with some of the things that I recommended in the first volume, some very basic things that I think everybody, if you're going to go out and look for Sasquatches, there's some things you should have. And evidence collection is an important one. There's a lot of people, and first of all, let me hit on the whole DNA thing. If anybody out there listening thinks that DNA is going to prove these things are real, it's not, because, and I won't mention our gentleman's name in the Southwest who's a police officer, and he's also retired military, special forces. So good guy, knows his stuff. A buddy of his, and this happened, I told Tom this, there was a situation that happened. There was actually a whole bunch of ongoing situations. And Jay, you know who he is. I told you earlier. There was a situation where there was a bunch of these things that happened. These incidents that were kind of a chain of incidents that happened. And one of them involved a 15-year-old boy who was riding his bike home one evening. And the area, apparently the county doesn't have a lot of money, so they only put street lights along the roads where there's danger points, curves, things like that, where there might be potential accidents. So the kid happened to get the feeling he was being followed, so he stopped under one of these street lights, and he looked behind him, and here's this massive creature on all fours, and he said it was right around 6 or 7 feet high, even on all fours. And he, of course, had an underwear changing moment, tried to take off on his bike. The thing reached out and grabbed the bike. The kid went flying over the handlebars and got up and took off running for home. And he got home in a state of panic, parents got him calmed down. He told them what he saw. They called 911. So the sheriff's department came out, and the deputy sheriff was a little skeptical, obviously. And the kid said, basically, screw you. I know what I saw. So the deputy says, okay, let's go back out to the place where this happened. Let me take a look around. So they got back out there. They found his bike 10 feet up a tree with the frame bent. And I've told the story before on a couple of podcasts, but I didn't really include the full details because there was blood on the bike where the creature grabbed it, apparently cut its hand, and quite a bit of blood. So the deputy took a sample and sent it in for what they call, I think, the cheap test or the quick test or whatever. He just wanted to make sure it wasn't somebody who was maybe, child molester or whatever in their database. And the lab inadvertently screwed up and did a full spectrum analysis on the blood. And instead of, it being $20, it was something like $20,000. And it took a year. It took a year for the test to get back. So the sheriff kind of went ballistic on the deputy, saying, what the hell is all of this about? What you sent us in for? And he says, look, I hear it's documented. I only sent it in for the cheap test. So the bottom line is the results came back, and it came back unknown primate. But that's really the best a DNA test is going to do with one of these things. So I'm not particularly interested in that. I mean, I have an outfit in Canada who will do a DNA test for about $1,000. So if we happen to come up with something, we can get it tested. But really, all a DNA test is going to do for our purposes, it's not going to prove these things are real. It's just like the whole dermal ridge thing and all this other crap that's gone on in the last 20 years. All these geniuses out there, they'll take one little piece of the whole picture and they think they've solved it. Well, something DeHinden told me years ago. He said you can have, 100 pictures or 100 films of these things, and the general public still isn't going to buy it. What it's going to take.
The whole premise for that is your analysis is only as good as your database.
Absolutely, and everybody thinks that DNA is a magic bullet. Well, we've studied human beings a whole lot, so we know a lot about us. But when you look at the rest of the DNA database, there isn't a whole lot there. I mean, science has studied some animals, but again, you have to, like you said, you have to know a little bit more about that for it to have the meaning. So you can't just plug any little thing in the DNA database and pull out a magic bullet.
When people come back and they say, it's human DNA, immediately they think contamination.
Right. Right.
Totally in the scientific world. It's very easy to dismiss, just like, photos, videos.
Absolutely.
Everybody, Will and I were talking about this earlier, where people just go, the average person is going to go, oh, that's Photoshop, or that's,
right.
Somebody CGI'd that. Not understanding, what it really takes to do CGI to that level of expertise to make it look like a natural creature in the wild.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think a lot of these things take a little bit more scrutiny. People out there, they just they like to be, what was the term? There used to be a term for it when I was in the military, the pablum pukers or whatever. People they like to be fed bullshit, and they'll believe whatever's on the thin surface. And if, we have one of the most marvelous tools on the planet, this little thing up here that's used most often as a hat rack. And we really ought to use that to dig a little bit deeper before we make a conclusion about something. So, yeah, I mean, and it could be, well, now in some of those cases, I know there's, like the whole Melba Ketchum thing, and I don't even want to get into that because that's a whole nightmare, that whole deal. But I know, I've seen it on TV where people go out and they find a hair on a tree, and what do? They grab it with their fingers and they stuff it in their pocket. Mm-hmm. Well, God only knows what sort of contaminants are in it. And then when I wrote notes in the field, I talked to an expert up in Edmonton, and he apparently there was a recent Bigfoot sighting up there in that part of Canada, and the people who claimed they saw the creature sent some of the hairs to the facility he worked at, and he did the test, and it came back buffalo hair. So I found his information and called him, and we had a nice chat because I wanted people to understand from a professional about how DNA worked, and he explained a lot of this to me about how if it's something like this, an unknown primate, he says that's the best that's going to come up because it may have certain markers that are going to be similar, that are recognized as primate, but beyond that, because it hasn't been studied, they wouldn't know. And there's also we talk about like collecting information. There's a chain of custody issue. If you don't take a sample directly off the body, how in the hell do you know what it came off from? There is no way to know that.
We have to corroborate the evidence, and even
exactly.
Like, I used to do urinalysis and stuff like that, in the military.
Sure.
And when you're dealing with even things like sampling blood for content, there's gas spectroscopy that's conducted. And I think it's 9 different types of gas that have to be administered to the sample at very specific
right.
To come up with your result. So it's one of those where it sounds good on the outside, and
it does.
A perfect science. But when you actually talk to the scientists that conduct that, they're like, it's nowhere close to
right
95% of whatever until they get an actual sample that they can pull something off of.
Right.
And a lot of times they have to culture that so many times to get something viable off of it that
and people
is really what we're talking about, because if you can like your pictures and you go, I put it in the question mark column. Interesting.
Right. It's interesting, sure.
If you can take a witness report and a picture and match it to a footprint, and there's some scat or whatever, or a track trail, and you can put that on a map, and then over time, well, I'll continue this just real quick because that kind of sparked my brain here. So in evidence collection, some of the things that I'm picking up on here, you got it's all gamuts. Take pictures, write it down, draw a picture, whatever you need to do. Grid it off, scale it, and ask them to walk you through that so that you can get the maximum view. Use a scale object. I don't know how many pictures I've seen that people have sent to me or that I've seen on the internet where it's a picture of a footprint, it's a picture of something. One of the
right, and it's worthless.
With an arm, with somebody's arm pointing at it.
Right.
And I looked at that and I thought, I've just shown that picture to a couple people and went, I'm not even going to tell you what I'm going to show you.
And the caption under the picture is, now we know why Bigfoot screams.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can have the kind of intellectual conversation words about the volume and the diameter and all those things, whether it's protein or whatever's in it. You can have those discussions after you.
Oh yeah.
They just look at that and go, what? What could possibly, because if you didn't have it there for scale, okay, it's a big pile of.
Sure, it doesn't. And one of the habits we used to have, the old timers and this stuff, was always sticking your foot next to the track.
Yeah.
That's the easy one. You put your foot up there and you're like, well, I know how big my foot is, so here's what we can show. But yeah, there's a lot of things. We can do another whole show on evidence and how to deal with that. But we're actually running out of time on this one. But
Eventually, what I would like to be able to do is once we get the database up.
Can I say something really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hold on, Joe.
Once we get the database up and running, I'd like to be able to, put pins on a map digitally, and say, okay, here's the locations. Because in the military, in the Army, I worked in intelligence. And this is what we did. You would make pattern wheel, and a pattern wheel is simply, the hours of the clock face. If you picture a clock face that looks like a circle, right? So you've got, 12 o'clock all the way around back 12 o'clock, so 12, 3, 9, whatever. And then you go from the inside for dates, and you carry that out whatever scale you want to days. So you start, and you have one in the middle, and you go all the way out to 30 days or whatever.
Mm-hmm. You can plot movements.
And you say this is incident number 1, and you write out every detail that went with it, so you've got the intelligence report, and then you give it that number, and then you put it the time wheel, and over time you start to develop patterns of, here's some activity, and then you start asking yourself the questions of, okay, why is that happening in that time span where it's an hour before?
Right.
And then you can look at where it's going on the map, and you can start doing some predictive analysis.
Absolutely.
Behavior, or where you think they might be, or why, and maybe position yourself that way. So that it's,
Mhm.
like you say, Robert. We're going to have to go regionally and try and say, what they're doing.
Right. And we can do that. We're not hearing you, Jay.
Hey, can I say something real quick?
Oh, there you go. Okay. Go ahead, Gerald.
Hey, I just wanted to say that, if you're fortunate enough to be in an area where you know that you've had activity, Robert, Damon, and I, we have spent a lot of money this year preparing for this year because we know they're in a hunting corridor. And I don't care who believes whatever evidence we're able to collect this year. We just want to do it for us. You know what I mean? We've got numerous cameras, recordings. We're going to be doing DNA traps. We're going to be, because this corridor is so important for them to hunt. Mm-hmm. We're going to set up cameras to where there's no way, if they want to avoid one, we're going to really check this infrared out. I'm going to tell you that right now. And we're going to have cameras up high, down low. We're going to get evidence this year. I'm almost certain, just like we did last year. I'm sure those pictures that Robert had got on his trail cam here was Whistler. He's the one that likes to whistle. Whatever evidence, I don't care if anybody wants to believe me or not, or Robert. We don't care. We're going out there to get evidence to secure us. We know. We want to prove it to ourselves. What we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're experiencing is true. And let the chips fall where they may.
What area is Gerald?
He's in Southwest Washington.
Okay, Pacific.
Actually, he's not far from where we did all our investigations, back in Yakult in that area.
Yeah, I live on the Washougal River. Okay. No, well, not too far from it anyway.
Well, fellas, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up for this time. I think we should maybe continue this conversation next week. What do you guys think?
Hopefully, I'm not working.
Okay. Well, if not, we need to get Jeremiah on too, because I'd like to have all three regional directors on so we can kind of continue talking about what goes into reporting. And again, it's a lot more than just we see reports all over the internet and these different groups and things. Those are very basic, I would call beginners reports, because when you really investigate a situation, and you guys know from doing this already, you can unearth a whole lot more information, and there are definitely techniques to use to get to that, and it's definitely what we want to do. So,
where's Jay from?
I'm in Alabama right now, so I'm kind of the southeast.
Yeah, Jay covers the southeastern quarter of the United States, and Tom, since we don't have a regional director in the Southwest, Tom is covering the Western United States, and Jeremiah is our Northeast director. And that's something I've talked to you three guys too also about. We need to kind of draw lines, I guess, quarter of the country, so everybody knows where their area is, kind of your boundary. So if people join up, they know which one of you guys they report to. But we'll talk about all that tomorrow when we do our Skype call. And so anyway, our buddy TW made it in Craig Knock. So let me wrap this up, fellas. We'll continue this chat on reporting next week, I think, because it's important. It's important, and I think it's something we should do a little bit more talking about. So thanks, everyone, for joining us this week, and join us again next week, next Thursday, for the next edition. We're going to talk about reporting some more. Check the website out, williamjevning.com. Go on Facebook. Look at our group page, the JRG Bigfoot Research page. We've got quite a few people join up on the website, and get a hold of one of us. Go on the pages. Now, since we are starting to have the pages up, and also the regional directors are having their own pages up there, if that's the part of the country you're in and you want to either join one of the teams or make your own team, get a hold of one of those people, and we'll get you set up and going. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you again next week.
Later.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.